So apparently some people show up to their very first day of work, sit down in orientation and think, yeah, this feels like a great time to sell meal prep bowls out of my crockpot in the parking garage. We found 49 of these people, and trust me, they only get dumber and somehow more impressive as the list goes on. Smash that like button, subscribe so you don't miss the chaos, and do not go anywhere, because number 26 alone is going to make you question everything you know about the American workforce. 1. A guy spent the entire welcome video pausing it every 30 seconds to film unboxing content for his mystery snack subscription service. He had quietly turned the conference room camera around on himself like he owned the place. Other new hires kept glancing over, wondering why he was whispering product descriptions into a lens. The HR rep assumed he was just a visual learner. He was not a visual learner. He uploaded the footage before the video even finished playing. 2. A woman secretly set up a ring light behind her orientation folder and started doing voiceovers for her ASMR channel using the office ambient noise as her backdrop. She hummed softly between sentences thinking nobody noticed. Everyone assumed it was just workplace anxiety making the sound. HR walked over to investigate and discovered she had a professional microphone hidden inside her tote bag. The episode went live that same evening with the title Office Sounds and got 3,000 plays overnight. 3. A new hire spent the entire cybersecurity training quietly writing a Yelp review of the orientation itself. He rated the parking situation a 2 and gave the snack table a very generous 4. The presenter kept making eye contact thinking he was engaged, but he was actually debating whether the office lighting deserved its own category. He posted the review before the session officially ended. By end of day, it had 11 helpful votes and 1 comment asking if the bathroom was clean. 4. A young woman answered a client call right in the middle of the emergency evacuation drill. Everyone else stood up and walked toward the exit like responsible adults. She stayed at her desk completely unbothered with 1 finger raised asking the fire warden to give her a moment. She closed the deal while standing next to an empty room. Security found her still on the phone near the fire exit. She got written up the same afternoon and told her friend later that evening it was absolutely worth it. 5. A man running a life coaching side hustle sat through the entire HR presentation, nodding so aggressively that 2 new hires thought he was having a medical episode. Every time the presenter mentioned finding purpose at work, he leaned forward like she was speaking directly to his soul. Between slides, he slid business cards across the table to whoever was sitting closest. By the 3rd slide, he had distributed 9 cards. The HR rep picked one up off the floor and read it. She kept it. 6. A new hire brought his podcast co-host to orientation and introduced him to the group as his brother. They sat next to each other the entire day, looking completely normal from the outside. Under the table, both of them had microphones running into a shared recorder inside a backpack. They were recording a full episode titled Corporate Initiation and had already planned the ad break. The host asked the HR presenter 3 questions specifically to get usable audio. The episode dropped on Thursday. 7. A man kept raising his hand during the benefits presentation, asking extremely specific questions about FSA compatibility and standing desk reimbursement policies. The benefits coordinator thought he was the most prepared new hire she had ever seen. He was not prepared for the job. He was live typing every answer into a Reddit thread called Corporate Benefits Decoded that already had 400 upvotes before lunch. By the time orientation ended, the thread had been shared twice in a personal finance Facebook group with 60,000 members. 8. A guy had a second laptop sitting open on the table that he casually described as his note-taking device. It was not a note-taking device. It was streaming a live eBay auction he was running for a collection of vintage sneakers he had listed that morning. He refreshed the page 40 times throughout the day, and HR actually counted because the clicking was becoming a pattern. He won the auction during the lunch break and pumped his fist under the table thinking nobody saw him. 3 people saw him, 9. A man kept raising his hand during orientation, but every single question he asked was secretly sourcing material for his upcoming comedy special. He asked about the PTO policy and then paused dramatically, like he was waiting for a laugh track. He asked about the dental plan and then whispered to the person next to him that it was going straight into Act 2. The HR rep appreciated his enthusiasm and told her coworker later that he seemed very curious. He was curious about one thing only, and it was not the job. 10. A woman spent the entire orientation building a detailed comparison spreadsheet of this company's health benefits versus every other company she had interviewed at over the past 4 months. She formatted it cleanly with color coding and drop-down filters. By the time the presenter moved to the retirement plan slide, she had already decided to sell access to the spreadsheet for $4.99 a month. She bought her own domain during the bathroom break. The site had 3 subscribers before she drove home. 11. A guy listed his orientation chair as his official content creator studio on his LLC paperwork during the benefits enrollment portion of the day. He filled out the address section with the conference room number and everything. Someone at the table noticed and asked if that was allowed, and he said he had done his research. A notary was somehow present and involved in the situation, and nobody could explain how she got into the building. HR reviewed the security footage later and found no record of her arrival or departure. 12. A woman was running a rent-a-friend service on the side and managed to book 2 separate clients during the lunch break office tour. She walked them through the building, pointing out the best natural lighting spots and the quietest hallways like she had worked there for years. Her manager passed by and assumed she was just being exceptionally warm and welcoming to visitors. She charged both clients for a 90-minute experience and left them 5-star reviews herself that evening to keep her profile ranking high. 13. A woman sat through the entire HR welcome presentation, quietly editing her Airbnb listing for the spare room she was renting out. Every phrase the presenter used about creating a welcoming environment and collaborative space, she copied word for word directly into her listing description. The presenter felt unusually good about her speech that day, not knowing her exact words were being published to a vacation rental platform in real time. The listing picked up Superhost momentum by Friday, and 2 guests booked before the weekend arrived. 14. A guy treated his own orientation like a mystery shopping assignment and brought a printed Google Doc with official-looking categories to rate the experience. Snack quality received a 4 out of 10. Presenter energy got a 6. He wrote 1 full paragraph under ambiance that referenced the overhead lighting as aggressive and uninspiring. He handed a printed copy to the HR rep before leaving. She read it in the elevator. She did not disagree with the lighting comment. 15. An older woman spent the entire team culture segment of orientation quietly recruiting her new colleagues into her multi-level marketing business. She waited until the presenter started talking about building strong teams and then took that as a direct sign from the universe to start passing things around the table. She later described the timing as spiritually perfect. 2 new hires took her brochure out of politeness. One of them actually read it on the train home and texted her 3 questions. She responded within 4 seconds. 16. A new hire had a crockpot running in his car in the parking garage and used every bathroom break as an opportunity to go downstairs and check on it. He made 5 separate trips before noon, which his orientation group assumed was a bladder situation. By lunchtime, the smell of slow-cooked chicken had quietly drifted into the elevator lobby. He came back upstairs carrying 12 meal prep containers and sold every single one to other employees before the afternoon session started. He accepted Venmo and cash. 17. A guy spent the office tour portion of orientation with his orientation packet flipped over to the blank side, sketching a full vendor booth layout for a farmer's market he had that coming Saturday. He drew the tent dimensions with remarkable accuracy and mapped out where the cash box would sit relative to the product display. When someone leaned over and asked what he was drawing, he said future planning. He then turned to the HR rep and asked very seriously if anyone in the building owned a ruler he could borrow. 18. A young man built what he described as a productivity app entirely on a legal pad during the digital tools training portion of the day. It was a hand-drawn grid with color-coded columns and small symbols in each cell that only he understood. No technology was involved at any point in the creation process. During the break, he walked directly over to two members of the IT team and began pitching it using words like scalable and user-first. One of them asked if it was an app. He said it was in its analog phase. 19. A woman kept stepping out of the orientation room to handle something urgent, which she said with enough confidence that nobody questioned her the first 3 times. She was standing in the hallway FaceTiming strangers she had matched with on a paid social coaching app she operated from her phone. Each session was $12 and lasted 8 minutes. She completed 4 sessions before the afternoon break. On her 5th exit, the HR coordinator followed her into the hallway and stood there silently until she ended the call and walked back inside without saying a word. 20. A new hire filled out his W-4 tax withholding form as fully exempt and then leaned toward the person sitting next to him and whispered that his plant-sitting side hustle for Airbnb guests alone covered most of his monthly expenses anyway. The woman next to him stared at him for a long moment before writing something down. He assumed she was impressed. She was actually noting it to tell her husband about later because she could not believe what she had just heard from someone on their very first day of employment. 21. A woman used the company printer during the 15-minute break to print 200 flyers for her mobile notary business and stacked them neatly on top of the official HR handouts like they belonged there. Nobody questioned the stack because it looked professionally organized. 3 new hires picked up a flyer thinking it was part of the orientation materials and called her number before the afternoon session even started. She answered every call from inside the orientation room by pretending to cough loudly first as a warning to herself. 22. A woman sat through every single group activity, quietly ghostwriting LinkedIn posts for 3 separate paying clients on her phone under the table. She billed one client during the lunch break by sending an invoice through her phone while eating a sandwich with her other hand. She typed with impressive one-thumb speed and never once lost her place in the orientation presentation. By the time the HR rep wrapped up the final slide, she had submitted 2 full posts and was already drafting a 3rd for a client who had messaged her requesting a tone adjustment. 23. A guy took the orientation name badge with his name and job title printed on it and used it as the official headshot for his new freelance consulting website. He cropped everything out except his face and the company logo visible in the background behind him. He did not ask anyone for permission at any point during this process. He did not consider asking. The website went live at 3 in the afternoon, while he was still sitting in the orientation room, nodding at a slide about company values and professional conduct. 24. A new hire requested a bathroom break every single time the presenter said the word synergy, which turned out to be 11 times across a 4-hour session. His orientation buddy assumed he had a medical condition and quietly slid him an antacid tablet out of genuine concern. He was not unwell. He was standing in the hallway recording voicemail affirmations for a wellness app he had built that charged users a monthly subscription to receive motivational messages. He returned each time looking refreshed and oddly centered, which somehow made it more suspicious. 25. A young woman brought a laminated menu to orientation for her private chef side hustle and slid it across to the person sitting next to her the moment the catering trays arrived at the lunch table. The menu had 3 tiers and a seasonal note at the bottom written in italics. 2 people at the table placed actual orders without fully processing what was happening. She fulfilled both orders from a cooler she had stored in the trunk of her car and delivered the containers personally during the afternoon break like it was a completely normal Tuesday. 26. A new hire sat through the intellectual property portion of the orientation presentation with quiet and focused intensity that the presenter mistook for genuine engagement. He was using every legal definition displayed on the slides to correctly fill out a trademark application for his own business name in real time on his phone. The presenter felt unusually good about how clearly she had explained trademark law that afternoon. She had no idea she had essentially provided free legal consulting to someone who was actively filing paperwork while she was still mid-sentence. 27. A woman's screen share went accidentally live during the tech walkthrough portion when it was her turn to demonstrate the system. Her entire desktop appeared on the projector screen at the front of the room for approximately 8 full seconds. The tabs visible included wholesale supplier research and a Canva document titled My 6-Figure Exit Plan in large, bold letters. She closed the laptop immediately and laughed in a way that was slightly too relaxed for the situation. The HR rep made a note. The IT coordinator made a longer note. 28. A new hire brought a tape measure to orientation and used the office tour portion of the day to quietly measure multiple rooms throughout the building. When a manager asked what he was doing, he said future reference in a tone that discouraged any follow-up questions. He was actually scouting the entire space to pitch it as a weekend pop-up shop venue that he planned to list on an event rental platform. He had the pricing structure sketched out before the tour ended and texted his business partner the square footage from the elevator on the way back upstairs. 29. A woman spent the entire company mission statement video composing a completely original mission statement for a competing business concept she had been developing on the side for several months. She finished it before the video ended and read it back to herself silently. She decided it was significantly stronger than the one currently playing on the screen in front of her. She leaned over to the woman sitting next to her and whispered that she thought hers was better. The woman next to her read it, and after a long pause, quietly agreed with her. 30. A guy had his freelance photography portfolio website open on his laptop the entire day, set to live refresh every few minutes so he could monitor how many visitors were viewing his work. Every time a new visitor clicked through to his gallery page, he made slow and deliberate eye contact with the HR rep across the table as if she were somehow responsible for the traffic spike. She assumed he was just a very intense listener. He was an intense listener only about one specific subject, and it had nothing to do with anything being presented that afternoon. 31. An older woman listed her orientation day as an official market research trip inside her side hustle business expense tracker before she even sat down in her chair. She logged the mileage from her house to the office building with precise accuracy and filed for reimbursement through her LLC before the afternoon session started. She also logged the free coffee and muffin she consumed at breakfast as competitive product sampling. Her accountant called her 3 days later with several follow-up questions. She answered every single one with complete confidence and zero hesitation. 32. A young woman asked the IT department during the tech setup portion of orientation if she could use the company's licensed Adobe software for a quick personal project she needed to finish. The IT coordinator said yes, assuming she meant something small and simple. The project was a full commercial rebrand for a paying client that included 3 logo variations, a brand color palette, and a complete font guide. She finished everything before the session ended and emailed the final files to her client from the company computer, while the IT coordinator stood 2 feet away eating a granola bar. 33. A guy used the group icebreaker activity, where everyone was asked to share a skill nobody knew they had, as a direct opportunity to distribute his pressure washing business cards to the entire room. He stood up calmly and slid a card with a QR code printed on it across to every person at the table before saying a single word. 4 people scanned the code while the presenter was still explaining the activity. One person scanned it twice by accident and then felt too embarrassed to ask how to unscan it, so he just sat quietly with the website open on his phone. 34. A woman sat through the entire orientation with her phone flat on the table, responding to negative Google reviews left on her nail technician business page in real time. She typed with one thumb while using her other hand to take what appeared to be legitimate orientation notes in a spiral notebook. Her responses were detailed and professionally worded, which required significantly more concentration than anything being presented at the front of the room. She replied to 11 reviews across the full day and flagged 2 of them as policy violations without ever once putting her pen down. 35. An older man had wireless earbuds in for the entire orientation and nodded continuously throughout every presentation in a way that seemed engaged and attentive. He was actually on back-to-back peer tutoring calls with college students who were paying him by the hour for academic help. When the HR rep called on him directly during a group discussion, he said, "Can you repeat the question with the exact same calm energy he used on his students when they lost track of the lesson?" The HR rep repeated the question. He answered it correctly. Nobody suspected anything. 36. A new hire had a scheduled concierge delivery arrive at the front office lobby at exactly 11:30 in the morning. The delivery was not for him personally. It was a fulfillment order for a personal concierge business he operated where clients paid him to coordinate food pickups on their behalf. He walked down to the lobby, collected the bag, and handed it directly to a client who had been waiting near the entrance. HR watched the entire exchange from the elevator with the doors open. Nobody spoke. The doors eventually closed. He came back upstairs and opened his laptop like nothing had occurred. 37. A new hire submitted an official IT help desk ticket during orientation, requesting that the company whitelist a specific website so he could access it on the internal network. The website was his own personal e-commerce store that he had launched 2 weeks earlier. He carbon copied himself on the ticket and listed the business justification as essential workflow tool. The IT coordinator opened the ticket, flagged it as unusual, and walked over to ask a clarifying question. The new hire explained it with such calm corporate language that the IT coordinator went back to his desk, genuinely unsure what the correct response was. 38. A woman sent a cold email to every single speaker and presenter who stood at the front of the room that day, offering them her executive communication coaching services. She sent each email immediately after the person finished their segment while they were still gathering their notes and stepping away from the podium. She sent 7 emails across the full day using a template she had clearly prepared in advance. 2 presenters replied before orientation ended. One of them asked about pricing. She had the rate card ready in a separate tab and sent it within 40 seconds. 39. A young man tried to negotiate his official start date during the orientation session itself, so that it would fall after his Kickstarter crowdfunding campaign reached its deadline. He explained the situation to HR with a calm and reasonable tone, like it was a completely standard request. HR said no immediately. He pulled out his phone and showed them the campaign page anyway without being asked. They looked at it for longer than they intended to. He noticed them reading it, and before they handed the phone back, he had already made 2 sales directly from people in that room. 40. A woman had a personal accountability partner who called her every 30 minutes throughout the entire orientation day to check in on her side hustle progress and make sure she was hitting her daily goals. She took every single call. She stepped slightly to the side of her chair and spoke in a low, focused voice while nodding at whoever was presenting as if she were simply stretching her neck. She later described the practice to a colleague as maintaining boundaries in a corporate environment. The colleague had no idea what that meant in this specific context, but nodded anyway. 41. A new hire flipped his paper name tent card around and taped one of his business cards to the back of it, facing outward toward the rest of the orientation group. It sat there for 6 full hours, completely visible to everyone in the room. 3 separate people photographed it throughout the day for reasons that were never explained. Not a single person mentioned it out loud or asked him to remove it. The HR rep noticed it during the afternoon session and looked at it for a long moment before deciding it was not covered in the employee handbook and moving on. 42. An uncle raised his hand during the organizational chart presentation and asked very specifically which department was responsible for managing external vendor contracts. Everyone assumed he was trying to understand the company structure like a normal new hire. He was not interested in the company structure at all. He was trying to identify the exact person he needed to get in front of so he could pitch himself as an outside vendor for a service the company was already paying someone else to provide. He got the name. He sent a LinkedIn request before the session ended. 43. A teenage girl left orientation 40 minutes early without explanation and came back through the door carrying 12 large bags of assorted chips she had purchased from a convenience store down the street. She arranged them in her tote bag by flavor and began selling each one for $2 to the other new hires who had been sitting in a snack-free room for several hours. When the HR coordinator asked what she was doing, she explained calmly that she was testing price elasticity within a captive market. She sold every single bag. She also collected someone's Venmo handle to follow up with a reorder option. 44. A woman submitted her new hire welcome survey at the end of orientation day, but answered every single question about company culture by comparing it directly to her experience running her own resale store on Depop. Questions about team collaboration received answers about managing customer disputes. Questions about leadership support received a paragraph about packaging efficiency. Her overall satisfaction score was not a number. It was a color-coded spreadsheet she had attached as a separate document. HR opened the attachment. They read the whole thing. One of them forwarded it to a colleague with no additional comment. 45. A new hire signed up for the company mentorship program on his very first day, which impressed the HR team so much they mentioned it to his future manager as a great sign. What they did not know was that he had signed up specifically to gain access to an experienced professional he could then reverse mentor about the skincare brand he had been quietly building for 8 months. He arrived at the first meeting with a tote bag. Inside the tote bag were 3 product samples. His mentor left that meeting with all 3 samples and a discount code he did not remember agreeing to accept. 46. A guy was running his entire cryptocurrency wallet dashboard on his laptop through the company orientation Wi-Fi and kept making audible gasping sounds at irregular intervals throughout the afternoon session. The first gasp the presenter ignored. The second gasp she paused her slide for. By the fourth gasp, 3 new hires had turned their chairs slightly in his direction out of concern. When the presenter stopped and asked directly if he was all right, he looked up from his screen with complete sincerity and said it depends entirely on what Ethereum does in the next 4 minutes. Nobody followed up with a second question. 47. A woman arrived at orientation carrying a large fabric swatch book that she set on the table beside her notepad, like it was standard office equipment. She was running a corporate uniform redesign consultancy on the side, and had chosen orientation day specifically to scout potential clients in a room full of new professionals. During the welcome speech, she held different fabric swatches up discreetly next to the HR representative's blazer and made quiet notes about undertones and texture. The HR rep felt unusually observed during her speech, but could not identify the source of the feeling until someone pointed at the swatch book afterward. 48. A new hire raised his hand during the open Q&A portion at the end of orientation and asked whether the company had an internal creator fund or any kind of revenue-sharing program for employees. There was no such program. The HR rep said so clearly and directly. He looked genuinely surprised in a way that suggested he had been counting on a different answer. He sat with that information for a few seconds and then raised his hand again to ask 2 detailed follow-up questions about a program that had just been confirmed not to exist. The room was very quiet during both questions. 49. An older woman nodded through every single presentation of the entire orientation day with the calm, focused expression of someone who was completely present and professionally engaged. She was live bidding on a storage unit auction from her phone under the table the entire time. She won the auction at 2:47 in the afternoon, and the notification sound was just loud enough for the person next to her to hear it. The presenter stopped and asked if everything was okay. The woman looked up slowly and said sorry that was urgent in a tone that made it clear she would not be elaborating further. She did not elaborate further. And honestly, some of these people did not come to orientation to get a job. They came to get a location. If you laughed at least once during this video, your taste is legally certified. Hit that like button, subscribe to BrainFumble, and turn on notifications because we are just getting started. Share this with someone who would absolutely do half of these things. Now tell us in the comments which one of these 49 people you think actually got promoted first. Drop your answer below.